The shattering of glass echoed through our kitchen, but it wasn't the broken wine glass that destroyed my world that night. It was the text message I wasn't supposed to see. "Hi, I'm Rachel, 32 years old, certified public accountant with my own small practice in suburban Massachusetts. 5 years ago, I married Mark, my college sweetheart, the man I thought would be my forever. We had the house with the white picket fence, weekend brunches with friends, and plans to start trying for a baby this year. A picture-perfect life that now feels like a cruel joke. It started 8 months ago when Mark's sister Lisa showed up at our doorstep, mascara streaming down her face, 2 overstuffed suitcases behind her. Her boyfriend of 3 years had cheated on her, kicked her out of their apartment, and she had nowhere to go. As she stood there shivering in the February cold, I felt that familiar pull of obligation that comes with family. Mark immediately offered our guest room until she gets back on her feet. "It'll just be for a few weeks," he promised, squeezing my hand as we lay in bed that night. She's family. Family. The word that would eventually become the most twisted irony in this entire nightmare. The first month was fine. She was quiet, polite, helped with dishes, and even cooked dinner occasionally. But looking back, I can see the subtle shifts that I dismissed. The way her eyes lingered on Mark during conversations, how she'd casually touch his arm or shoulder when passing by, the strategic timing of her showers right before he got home from work. I remember the exact moment my subconscious started sending warning signals. We were having Sunday dinner, and Lisa mentioned she'd finally scheduled a therapy session. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about my identity lately," she said, pushing food around her plate. "Finding out I was adopted at 17 really messed me up." Mark nodded sympathetically. "Mom and Dad should have told you sooner." "Would it have made a difference, though?" Lisa asked, looking directly at him, "knowing we're not actually related by blood?" There was something in the way she said it, a slight emphasis, a subtle shift in tone that made my stomach tighten. Mark didn't seem to notice, but I did. I definitely did. "Oh, you're still my sister," Mark said firmly. "Blood doesn't make family." Lisa smiled at him, but when her eyes flicked briefly to me, there was something cold there, something calculating. The changes became more obvious. Her wardrobe transformed. Suddenly she was wearing shorter shorts around the house, tighter tops, forgetting her robe after showers. I mentioned it to Mark one night, trying to sound casual. "Don't you think Lisa's been acting a bit different lately?" He looked confused. "Different how?" "The way she dresses around the house, the comments about not being blood-related, the constant touching." Mark laughed and kissed my forehead. "She's my sister, Rach. You're overthinking this." But I wasn't. 2 days later, I came home early from work with a migraine and heard them in the kitchen. I paused in the hallway, not intentionally eavesdropping, but something in their tone made me freeze. "You know I've always admired you," Lisa was saying, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Even before I knew I was adopted, finding that out just changed things in my mind." "Lisa," Mark's voice was warning, uncomfortable. "Don't. Why not? We're not actually related. It's not like it would be wrong." My heart stopped. The migraine pounded harder against my skull as I leaned against the wall, trying to process what I was hearing. "I'm married to Rachel. I love her. And you're my sister, regardless of biology. This conversation is inappropriate." I heard movement, then Mark's firm voice, "Don't, ever, do that again." I silently backed away, retreated to my car, and drove aimlessly for an hour, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. When I returned, they were in separate rooms, the tension palpable. Mark said nothing about the incident. Neither did I. I wanted to believe it was a one-time thing, that he'd shut it down completely. I was wrong. Over the next few weeks, Lisa's behavior escalated. She'd accidentally walk in on Mark in the bathroom. She'd find reasons to be alone with him. Once, I caught her wearing one of my dresses, one that Mark had always complimented me in. I started checking Mark's phone when he was in the shower. Most days, nothing suspicious. Until 3 weeks ago, when I noticed something odd, conversations with Lisa that seemed to start in the middle, as if earlier messages had been deleted. As a CPA, I've developed skills for discovering things people try to hide. Financial forensics isn't so different from digital forensics, it turns out. I installed recovery software on our shared computer, where Mark occasionally checked his messages, what I found turned my blood to ice. Lisa, I can't stop thinking about you, about us. What could be? Mark, Lisa, this is inappropriate. We've talked about this. Lisa, but you feel it too. I know you do. Mark, I'm married, and you're my sister. Lisa, not by blood, never by blood. There were photos she'd sent him, nothing explicit, but suggestive enough. Selfies in lingerie with captions like, "Bought this today, thought you might like it." He never encouraged her, but he never fully shut her down either. He never told me. I should have confronted them immediately, but some calculating part of my brain, the part that verifies numbers and finds discrepancies for a living, wanted irrefutable evidence. So I installed cameras in our common areas. Not the bedrooms or bathrooms, I'm not a monster, but the living room, kitchen, hallways. What I captured over the next week confirmed everything. Lisa constantly finding reasons to touch him, standing too close, accidentally, spilling things on herself so she'd have to change clothes. The most damning was footage of her trying to kiss him while I was at a client meeting. He pulled away, told her to stop, but still didn't tell me. I finally confronted Mark, showing him the messages and footage. He looked horrified, apologetic. I didn't want to hurt you," he said, his voice breaking. "I thought I could handle it, make her stop without creating family drama." "Family drama?" I laughed bitterly. "She's trying to seduce my husband, and you're worried about drama." That night, we confronted Lisa together. Instead of denial, she broke down in tears. "I'm sorry," she sobbed. "I've been so confused since finding out I'm adopted. My therapist says I'm having an identity crisis, attaching to the wrong people. Please don't tell Mom and Dad." I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Until I saw the calculating look that flashed across her face when Mark went to get her a glass of water. "He'll never love you like he could love me," she whispered, her tears miraculously dry. "We have a connection you couldn't understand. Push this, and I'll make sure your marriage doesn't survive." When Mark returned, her tears resumed as if on cue. That night, I called Mark's parents. They didn't believe me at first. Their perfect daughter would never do such a thing. But the evidence was undeniable. When they saw the videos and read the messages, Robert and Janet were devastated. "This isn't the daughter we raised," Janet sobbed over the video call. "They came the next day and took Lisa away. The confrontation was ugly," she screamed, accused me of manipulating everyone, claimed Mark had initiated everything. But her performance fell apart when Robert showed her the videos I'd sent them. "You're out of the will," he told her, his voice shaking with anger and disappointment. "The trust fund, the family business shares, all of it. We'll help you find an apartment and pay for therapy, but that's it." They left with Lisa, and for 3 blissful days, I thought the nightmare was over. Mark and I talked for hours each night, rebuilding, planning therapy, discussing how we'd move forward. Then I came home early again last Monday, another migraine pounding behind my eyes. The house was quiet. I assumed Mark was still at work, so I headed straight for our bedroom to lie down. I heard it before I saw anything. The shower running in our master bathroom, low voices murmuring beneath the spray of water. My heart already knew, but my brain needed to see it. I pushed open the bathroom door to find them together in our shower, Mark and Lisa, their bodies entwined under the steaming water. The wine glass I was holding, my emergency migraine remedy of cold white wine pressed against my forehead, slipped from my fingers and shattered against the tile floor. Their heads whipped around in unison, eyes wide, mouths forming identical O's of shock. Water continued to cascade over them as time seemed to freeze. "Rachel," Mark whispered, his voice barely audible over the running water. "I can explain." But there was nothing to explain. The ultimate betrayal was right in front of me, steaming up the mirrors and fogging the glass shower door. And in that moment, as I looked at my husband and his not-quite-sister, something inside me hardened. The pain was still there, white-hot and searing, but behind it rose something colder and more calculated. They had no idea what they'd just awakened. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply turned around, closed the door behind me, and walked out of the house with nothing but my purse and car keys. The sound of Mark calling my name faded as I pulled out of the driveway. I checked into a hotel 20 miles away. a generic chain where no one would think to look for me. Sitting on the edge of the stiff mattress, I stared at the wall for hours, my mind cycling between disbelief, rage, and a strange, detached clarity. My phone buzzed incessantly with texts and calls from Mark. "Rachel, please come home. We need to talk. It's not what you think. Please, just let me explain." Classic lines from the cheater's handbook. But this wasn't just any affair. This was my husband with his adoptive sister, the woman whose tears I had wiped away, the woman who had eaten at my table, slept under my roof, and then systematically worked to destroy my marriage. Around midnight, I finally responded with a single text. "I'll be sending someone to collect my things tomorrow. Do not contact me again except through my attorney." Then I blocked his number and turned off my phone. The next morning, I went into accountant mode, methodical, precise. I withdrew half of our joint savings, legally my right as a spouse. I called my office manager to clear my schedule for the week. Then I contacted Diane, my college roommate who had become a divorce attorney, and arranged to meet her that afternoon. "This is unprecedented," Diane said, her professional demeanor slipping as I laid out the evidence, the texts, the videos from my home security system. All of it. Technically, it's not incest by legal definition since they're not blood-related, but morally, ethically, the court will not look kindly on this. "I want everything I'm entitled to," I said, my voice flat, "and I want to make sure both of them face consequences." Diane nodded slowly. "Adultery is grounds for fault-based divorce in this state. The unique circumstances, her being his adopted sister, living in your home under your care, gives us significant leverage. But Rachel," she leaned forward, "are you sure you want to go nuclear? These things get ugly." I thought about the look on Lisa's face in our bathroom, not shock or shame, but something closer to triumph. "I'm sure." The divorce papers were served to Mark at his office 2 days later. I made sure they arrived during a client meeting, petty perhaps, but I wanted him to feel a fraction of the humiliation I'd experienced. The temporary restraining order, preventing him from accessing our joint financial accounts or entering the home I was still paying half the mortgage on, was the cherry on top. I stayed with Diane for the next week, sleeping on her pull-out couch and working remotely. My mother wanted me to come home to Ohio, but I refused to leave. Leaving would feel like surrender. It was Diane who discovered the first financial irregularities. "Rachel, when's the last time you checked your credit report?" she asked one evening, looking up from her laptop. 6 months ago, maybe." "Why?" She turned her screen toward me. "Because there are 3 new credit cards in your name that I'm guessing you didn't apply for." My stomach dropped as I looked at the report. 3 high-limit credit cards opened within the past 2 weeks, all maxed out, nearly $50,000 in charges for luxury items, designer clothes, electronics, even a down payment on a leased sports car. "That's impossible," I whispered. I didn't. And then it clicked. Lisa had been in our house for months. She'd had access to my personal documents, my mail, my computer. "Identity theft," Diane said grimly. "We need to call the police." The detective assigned to my case was thorough, taking copies of the credit reports, the timeline of Lisa moving in, and the evidence of her relationship with Mark. "This happens more often than you'd think," he told me. Family members are actually the most common perpetrators of identity theft because they have easy access to your information. I filed fraud reports with the credit bureaus, disputed the charges, and placed a freeze on my credit. The investigation moved surprisingly quickly. The security cameras at the dealership where I had put a down payment on a Mercedes clearly showed Lisa, not me, signing the paperwork. The delivery addresses for online purchases were traced to a new apartment, one I later learned Mark's parents had rented for Lisa before discovering our situation. 3 days later, Lisa was arrested for identity theft, fraud, and a host of financial crimes. Her mugshot appeared in the local police blotter, her perfect blonde hair disheveled, mascara streaked down her cheeks. This time, the tears were real. Mark called Diane's landline that night, somehow figuring out where I was staying. "Rachel, you've got to drop the charges against Lisa," he begged. "She's falling apart in there. My parents won't bail her out." "That's funny," I replied, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. I seem to be falling apart too, yet here you are, concerned only about her. She's my sister, he shouted. Is that what you called her when you were having sex with her in our shower? The line went silent. Goodbye, Mark. I hung up and blocked the number. The preliminary divorce hearing was scheduled for the following week. I prepared meticulously, gathering financial records, text messages, security footage, anything that would support my case. The identity theft investigation added another layer of complexity, but also strengthened my position. The morning of the hearing, I dressed carefully in a conservative navy suit, minimal makeup, my grandmother's pearl earrings, the image of the wronged but dignified wife. As I walked into the courthouse, I spotted Mark and his attorney waiting near the entrance. Mark looked terrible, unshaven, dark circles under his eyes, his normally immaculate suit wrinkled. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of something, not quite sympathy, but recognition of the man I had once loved, the future we had planned together, the children we would never have. Then I remembered the shower scene and the feeling evaporated. The hearing itself was brief but intense. Mark's attorney tried to paint Lisa's behavior as the result of psychological trauma from discovering her adoption, arguing that she had manipulated Mark. My attorney countered with evidence of ongoing contact between Mark and Lisa, even after her initial advances were supposedly rejected. When the judge asked if Mark had maintained contact with Lisa after her arrest, his hesitation was damning. Mr. Morrison, are you still in a romantic relationship with your adoptive sister? The judge asked directly. Mark looked at his feet. We're supporting each other through this difficult time. The judge's expression could have curdled milk. I see. This court takes a very dim view of the choices you've made, Mr. Morrison. He turned to me. Mrs. Morrison, the court grants your motion for exclusive use of the marital home during these proceedings. Mr. Morrison, you are ordered to continue mortgage payments as previously agreed. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. As we left the courtroom, Mark tried to approach me, but my attorney stepped between us. Rachel, please, he called out. Can we talk privately, just for a minute? Against Diane's advice, I nodded and stepped aside with him. What do you want, Mark? He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made my chest ache. I know I've made terrible mistakes, but this thing with Lisa, it's complicated. She was vulnerable and I was trying to help her, and somehow you just ended up having sex with your sister in our shower. I finished for him. Save it for someone who hasn't seen the text messages, Mark. The ones going back months. This wasn't a one-time mistake. She needed me, he whispered. And I didn't. The words caught in my throat. I was your wife. You've always been so strong, so self-sufficient, he said, as if that justified everything. Lisa is broken. I thought I could fix her. Well, congratulations, I said, turning to leave. Now you're both broken. And I'm not responsible for fixing either of you. 2 days after the hearing, Janet, Mark's mother, called me. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won out. Rachel, it's Janet. I need to talk to you. We met at a coffee shop halfway between our homes. Janet looked like she had aged a decade in the 2 weeks since I'd last seen her. Her normally perfectly coiffed silver hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wore no makeup. We've cut them both off, she said without preamble, her hands wrapped tightly around her coffee cup. Robert and I. We've removed Mark from the family business, taken him out of the will. Lisa too, of course, though we'd already done that. I wasn't sure what to say. Janet, you didn't have to. Yes, we did, she interrupted firmly. What they've done, it's unconscionable. We raised them as siblings. For 18 years, they were brother and sister. The fact that she's adopted doesn't change that. She took a shaky breath. And what they've done to you, I'm so ashamed, Rachel. You were family to us. Tears pricked at my eyes for the first time since discovering them together. Thank you, I whispered. Janet reached across the table and squeezed my hand. Robert and I want you to know that we're on your side. Whatever you need during this divorce, financial support, testimony, anything, we're there. I nodded, unable to speak past the lump in my throat. So there's something else, Janet added, her voice dropping. Something you should know. Lisa's bail hearing is tomorrow. Robert and I have decided not to pay it. What about Mark? I asked. He's been calling us constantly. begging us to help her. Janet's mouth twisted. We told him he made his choice when he betrayed his wedding vows with his sister. As I drove home from meeting Janet, I felt the first glimmer of something like satisfaction. Not happiness, I was nowhere near that, but a sense that justice might actually be possible. That night I slept in our bed, my bed now, for the first time since discovering them together. I changed the sheets, sprayed my favorite lavender linen spray, and opened the windows to let the spring air cleanse the space. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. I was just drifting off to sleep when my phone pinged with an email notification. Normally I wouldn't check at such a late hour, but something compelled me to look. It was from an anonymous email address. The subject line, "Thought you should know." I opened it to find a single image attachment. With trembling fingers, I downloaded it. The photo showed Mark and Lisa together at what appeared to be a hotel room. The timestamp in the corner was from 3 months ago, long before I discovered them in our shower, before Lisa's identity theft, before everything fell apart. This wasn't a momentary lapse or a recent development. This had been going on for months, right under my roof, while I worked and cooked and planned our future. And worse, the email had been sent from Mark's company email account. He wanted me to see this. He wanted me to know. I sat up in bed, fully awake now, rage coursing through me like electricity. If they thought I had been thorough in my response before, they had no idea what was coming next. Because this wasn't just about a divorce anymore. This was about making sure that both Mark and Lisa understood exactly what happens when you betray the wrong person. The person who knows every detail of your financial life, every vulnerability, every secret. Me. The photo burned in my mind as I stared at my ceiling until dawn broke. 3 months. At least 3 months of deception under my own roof while I worked 60-hour weeks during tax season to support us. While I cooked Sunday dinners for all 3 of us. While I listened sympathetically to Lisa's manufactured heartbreak over her ex-boyfriend. As the first light filtered through my curtains, I made a decision. No more tears, no more shock. It was time for calculated, methodical action, the kind I excelled at professionally. I showered, dressed in my most confidence-boosting outfit, a charcoal pencil skirt and crimson blouse that cost more than I'd like to admit, and sat down at my home office desk with a fresh legal pad. At the top I wrote, "The Reckoning." Step 1, information gathering. As Mark's wife and a co-signer on most of our financial accounts, I had access to everything. I pulled his credit reports, bank statements, phone records, email accounts, anything with a digital footprint. I wasn't looking for more evidence of the affair. I had enough of that. I was looking for leverage. It didn't take long to find it. Mark had always handled his own business taxes, insisting it was no trouble since he worked in finance. I'd respected his independence, focusing instead on our joint returns and my own business. That had been a mistake. His records were a mess of creative accounting, not exactly criminal, but skating dangerously close to the line. He'd been writing off personal expenses as business deductions for years, vacations disguised as conferences, expensive dinners listed as client meetings with no client names, even clothing and electronics classified as business necessities. Most concerning was a pattern of cash withdrawals totaling nearly $30,000 over the past year, with no clear documentation of where that money went. Given the timeline of the affair, I had a sickening suspicion. I made copies of everything, organized them meticulously, and locked the originals in my fireproof safe. Then I called Diane. "I need you to connect me with a forensic accountant," I told her, "and possibly someone from the IRS's Criminal Investigation Division." Diane's silence spoke volumes. "Rachel, are you sure you want to go there? Tax fraud investigations can take years, and they might look into your finances too, since you filed jointly." "I've got nothing to hide," I replied. "He can't say the same for Mark." By noon, I had appointments with a forensic accountant and had submitted an IRS whistleblower form, a step I never thought I'd take, but desperate times call for desperate measures. While the financial investigation would take time, Lisa's identity theft case was moving quickly. The detective called to inform me that the district attorney had enough evidence to pursue multiple felony charges. The credit card companies had removed the fraudulent charges from my accounts, but Lisa was still facing serious legal consequences. "She's requesting a meeting with you," the detective told me. Says she wants to apologize and make restitution to avoid a trial. Not interested, I replied immediately. That's what I figured, he said. But I'm legally obligated to pass along the request. Her public defender is trying to work out a plea deal, but the DA's office is pushing for maximum penalties, given the amount stolen and the relationship between you. Good, I said, surprising myself with the coldness in my voice. After hanging up, I checked my personal email and found a message from Robert, Mark's father. He'd attached financial records from the family business, showing that Mark had been embezzling small amounts for over a year, not enough to trigger immediate red flags, but substantial when added up. Nearly $45,000. I discovered this while removing Mark from the company accounts. Robert wrote, I haven't confronted him yet, so I thought you should know first, given everything else. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. The cash withdrawals from Mark's personal accounts, plus the embezzled company funds, roughly matched the amount Lisa had spent on her new apartment, designer wardrobe, and that ridiculous Mercedes. Mark had been funding their escape plan, their new life together, with stolen money. I forwarded the evidence to Diane with a simple message: more ammunition. The next day, Lisa's bail hearing proceeded as scheduled. As Janet had promised, neither she nor Robert appeared to post bail. Mark was there, looking increasingly desperate, but he couldn't afford the full amount on his own, especially since I'd frozen our joint assets and his parents had cut him off from the family business. Lisa remained in county lockup, facing multiple felony charges with inadequate legal representation. Under different circumstances, I might have felt sympathy. Now I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. Meanwhile, my divorce case was building momentum. Diane had filed additional motions based on the new evidence of long-term infidelity and financial impropriety. The judge assigned to our case had a reputation for traditional values and harsh views on adultery, particularly in cases with unusual circumstances like ours. We're positioning this as not just an affair, but a conspiracy, Diane explained during our strategy session. Mark and Lisa worked together to deceive you while living in your home, planning their future using funds partially stolen from you, culminating in identity theft and fraud. It's not just a divorce case anymore. It's a criminal conspiracy with you as the victim. I nodded and strangely detached. What's our goal here? Realistically, we want the judge to award you the house, your full business, all joint savings, and substantial alimony, given that your income supported both of them during their affair. Plus, we'll push for Mark to be responsible for all legal fees related to the identity theft case. It sounded devastating. It sounded perfect. 2 weeks later, I received an unexpected call from Janet. Rachel, are you sitting down? Her voice was shaking. Mark came to our house last night. He confessed everything. My heart raced. Everything. The affair with Lisa had been going on for nearly 6 months. Not 3. It started before she even moved in with you. The breakup with her boyfriend. A lie. They planned the whole thing so she could move in and they could be together under your roof. I gripped the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. Why is he confessing now? He needs money for Lisa's defense, Janet said bitterly. When we refused, he threatened to go public with family secrets if we didn't help them. Apparently, he thinks family embarrassment is worse than what they've done. What did you tell him? I asked. To get out of our house and never come back. Janet's voice broke. Robert had a mild heart attack an hour after Mark left. The doctors say he'll recover, but this stress isn't good for him. I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of genuine sympathy for Janet and Robert. They were victims in this too. I'm so sorry, Janet. Don't be. We've made our decision. We're testifying for your side in the divorce case. Robert insisted, even from his hospital bed. After hanging up, I sat in silence for several minutes, processing this new information. 6 months. Pre-planned. They had orchestrated this entire scenario, moving Lisa into our home under false pretenses, all to carry on their affair right under my nose. The rage I felt was no longer hot and consuming. It had crystallized into something harder and colder, more dangerous. I called Diane. I need you to subpoena Mark's email records going back 1 year, all of them, personal and business, and I want Lisa's visitor logs from the county jail. Why the visitor logs? She asked. Because I'm willing to bet Mark has been there every single day, and I want that documented for the court. Diane was quiet for a moment. Rachel, I need to ask you something. What's your end game here? Do you want to punish them, or do you want to move on with your life? Can't it be both? I asked. They destroyed what I thought was a loving marriage. They stole from me financially and emotionally. They lied to my face for months while living in my home. So yes, I want them to face consequences, but I also want to rebuild, eventually, just not until justice is served. The forensic accountant's preliminary report arrived 3 days later, confirming my suspicions about Mark's creative accounting. The report estimated that Mark had underpaid taxes by approximately $23,000 over the past 3 years through questionable business deductions and unreported income. Combined with the embezzlement evidence from Robert D., we had enough to request that the IRS conduct a full audit. This could take time, the accountant warned me, but once the IRS gets involved, they're like bloodhounds. They won't stop until they've examined every penny. Time is something I have plenty of now, I replied. The divorce proceedings continued to move forward. Mark's attorney, realizing the strength of our case, began pushing for mediation rather than a trial. He's worried about public record, Diane explained. Everything that comes out in court becomes accessible. The adopted siblings affair, the financial crimes, all of it, searchable by future employers, partners, everyone. Good, I said. Let him worry. I rejected the mediation offer outright. I wanted this on public record. I wanted future employers, partners, and neighbors to know exactly who Mark and Lisa were. Meanwhile, Lisa's identity theft case was approaching its trial date. Her public defender, overwhelmed with cases and recognizing the strength of the evidence against her, continued pushing for a plea deal. The prosecutor, possibly influenced by the unusual nature of the case and the mounting evidence of conspiracy, refused to offer anything less than multiple felony convictions with mandatory minimum sentencing. Mark's increasingly desperate attempts to secure funds for Lisa's defense led to more reckless decisions. He violated the temporary restraining order by attempting to withdraw money from one of our joint investment accounts that had been overlooked in the initial freezing of assets. The bank, alerted by my attorney, declined the transaction and reported the violation. The judge was not amused. At the emergency hearing that followed, Mark's attorney tried to argue that it was an innocent mistake. Your Honor, my client was simply confused about which accounts were covered under the restraining order. The judge peered over his glasses. Mr. Morrison, are you suggesting that a financial advisor with 15 years of experience doesn't understand how restraining orders work on financial accounts? Mark looked away. No, Your Honor. Then I'm finding you in contempt of court for violating the restraining order. You'll pay a $5,000 fine, and I'm extending the order to cover any and all financial accounts in your name, jointly held or otherwise. As we left the courtroom, Mark approached me in the hallway, ignoring Diane's warning glare. Rachel, this has gone too far, he hissed. Lisa is falling apart in jail. The prosecutor is talking about years, not months. Years. I looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since discovering them together. The man I had loved was unrecognizable now, desperate, disheveled, morally bankrupt. You should have thought about consequences before you started sleeping with your sister in our home, I replied evenly. Actions have consequences, Mark. You're both adults who made choices. Now you get to live with them. His face darkened. You won't get away with this. I know things about you too, Rachel. I laughed, genuinely amused by his desperation. What exactly do you think you know? I've never cheated. I've never stolen. I've filed accurate tax returns every year of my adult life. I'm a boring by-the-book accountant who believed her husband when he said he loved her. That's my great sin. I turned to walk away, but his next words stopped me cold. I know about the abortion. I froze, then slowly turned back. What did you say? Before we were married? That weekend you went to visit your cousin in Chicago. I found the clinic paperwork years ago. My mind raced back 8 years. We'd been dating for 3 years, but not yet engaged. I'd had a pregnancy scare, a genuine scare, not an actual pregnancy. The trip to Chicago had been for a professional conference, and I'd visited a women's clinic there for emergency contraception and testing, worried I might be pregnant when we weren't ready. The test had been negative. There had never been a baby, never an abortion, But Mark had found the paperwork and drawn his own conclusions, had been carrying this misconception for years without ever discussing it with me. I could have corrected him, shown him the negative test results I'd kept in my personal medical file. Instead, I simply stared at him, letting him see the contempt in my eyes. "And yet you married me anyway," I said finally. "How very magnanimous of you, carrying that secret resentment for all these years, using it now as a weapon when you're cornered." I stepped closer. "You want to know something, Mark? Even if it were true, which it isn't, it would still be less shameful than what you've done. At least I wouldn't have been sleeping with my brother." I walked away, leaving him standing open-mouthed in the courthouse hallway. That night, alone in my house, I poured myself a generous glass of wine and allowed myself a moment of genuine grief, not for the marriage I'd lost, which had clearly been built on lies, but for the person I'd thought Mark was, the future we'd planned that had never been real. The next morning, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in months. I was done being reactive. It was time to be proactive. I called Janet and arranged to meet her for coffee. When she arrived, I handed her a thick folder. "What's this?" she asked, opening it cautiously. "Everything," I said. "All the evidence. The financial records showing Mark's embezzlement from the family business, the text messages between him and Lisa going back 6 months, the security camera footage, the identity theft evidence, the IRS whistleblower filing, everything." Janet paled as she flipped through the documents. "Why are you giving me this?" "Because you and Robert deserve to know the whole truth, and because I'm filing a civil suit against both Mark and Lisa for conspiracy, fraud, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and a half-dozen other charges my attorney recommended." A civil suit. "But the divorce?" "The divorce handles our marital assets," I explained. "The civil suit is about the damages they caused through their deliberate actions, the emotional trauma, the professional disruption, the identity theft, all of it." Janet closed the folder, her hands trembling slightly. "What can we do to help?" "Testify," I said simply. "Tell the court what you've seen, what you know. Let the world know that you don't condone what they've done." 2 days later, Lisa's identity theft case reached its conclusion. With overwhelming evidence and no funds for an adequate defense, she accepted a plea deal, guilty to 2 felony counts of identity theft and fraud, with a sentence of 18 months in state prison, 3 years probation afterward, and full restitution of all stolen funds. The local paper ran a small article about the case, noting the unusual circumstances, that the perpetrator was the adoptive sister of the victim's husband, and that a related divorce case was pending. It wasn't front-page news, but it was public record now, searchable online forever. Mark's desperation grew as his own legal problems mounted. The IRS had officially opened an investigation into his tax returns for the past 5 years. The family business was considering its own charges related to the embezzlement. And our divorce case was proceeding exactly as Diane had predicted, with the judge increasingly sympathetic to my position with each new revelation. A week before our final divorce hearing, Mark's attorney contacted Diane with a settlement offer. "He'll agree to all your terms," Diane told me over the phone. "The house, the savings, the retirement accounts, everything. He's not even asking for any shared possessions beyond his personal items. In exchange, he wants you to drop the civil suit and agree not to testify in any criminal tax proceedings." "No deal," I said immediately. "The civil suit continues. As for the tax fraud, that's between him and the IRS now," Diane sighed. "Rachel, I understand the desire for complete vindication, but this settlement would give you everything you want financially without the continued stress of litigation." "This isn't about money anymore," I replied. "It's about accountability." The day of our final divorce hearing arrived. I dressed conservatively again, but with a bold red lipstick, a small act of defiance and strength. Mark looked even worse than the last time I'd seen him, gaunt, unshaven, with a defeated slump to his shoulders. The proceedings were surprisingly anticlimactic. Mark offered no defense, no counter-arguments. His attorney simply stated that Mr. Morrison accepted the court's judgment and wished to expedite the process. The judge reviewed the evidence one last time, then delivered his ruling. Given the extensive documentation of adultery, financial impropriety, and conspiracy to defraud, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff, Rachel Morrison. The defendant, Mark Morrison, shall surrender all rights to the marital home, joint savings accounts, investment portfolios, and retirement funds. Furthermore, he shall be responsible for all legal fees incurred by the plaintiff related to this divorce and the associated identity theft case involving Lisa Brennan. He paused, looking directly at Mark. Mr. Morrison, while this court cannot adjudicate the moral failings that led to this situation, I feel compelled to note that your behavior, conducting an affair with your adoptive sister while married, reflects a profound lack of character. This divorce is granted, effective immediately. With a bang of his gavel, my marriage was officially over. I was Rachel Taylor again. Reverting to my maiden name had been one of my first requests. Outside the courtroom, as I stood discussing next steps with Diane, Mark approached hesitantly. "Rachel, can I speak with you? Please, one last time." Against my better judgment, I nodded to Diane that it was okay. We stepped aside, maintaining a careful distance between us. "I just wanted to say," he began, then faltered. "I'm sorry for everything. I never meant for any of this to happen. But it did happen, Mark," I said quietly. "And it happened because of choices you made, repeatedly, day after day, for months." "I know." He looked down at his shoes, expensive Italian leather now scuffed and worn. "Lisa and I. It started as just talking. She was going through the adoption identity crisis, and I was trying to be supportive. But then it changed. I can't even explain how or when exactly." "You don't need to explain," I cut him off. "I don't care anymore. Not about the details, not about your justifications." "What happens now?" he asked. "With the civil suit, it proceeds as planned. You and Lisa will both be served with papers next week." He nodded, resigned. "And after that, will it ever be enough, Rachel? Will you ever feel like justice has been served?" I considered his question seriously. "I don't know, but I do know that actions have consequences. You and Lisa chose your actions. Now you get to experience the consequences." As I walked away from the courthouse, divorce decree in hand, I felt a strange mixture of emotions. Grief for what I'd lost, rage at the betrayal, but also, unexpectedly, a sense of power. For months, I had been a victim of their deception. Now I was taking control, ensuring that justice was served. The civil suit would take time. The IRS investigation would take even longer, but I was prepared for the long game. After all, accounting had taught me patience, the understanding that sometimes balancing the books takes time, but in the end, everything must reconcile. That evening, I returned to my house now legally and completely. I walked through each room slowly, reclaiming the space, mentally erasing the memories of betrayal and replacing them with possibilities for the future. In the master bedroom, I opened Mark's empty closet and hung a single item: the red dress I'd bought myself to celebrate the divorce, a symbol of the new chapter beginning. My phone buzzed with a text from Janet. "Robert and I are testifying in the civil case. We've also decided to speak with the IRS investigators about the business embezzlement. It's time for complete honesty." I smiled, feeling vindicated. The Morrison family, the family that had almost been mine, had chosen truth over blood ties, justice over misplaced loyalty. As I placed my phone on the nightstand, it buzzed again. An unknown number. I hesitated, then opened the message. It was a jail email system notification. From Lisa. "Rachel, I know you hate me, and you have every right to. What I did was unforgivable. But there's something you should know before my transfer to state prison tomorrow. Mark was planning to leave you long before I came into the picture. The affair with me was just convenient timing. Ask him about his assistant as Megan. Ask him about the business trips to Denver last year. I'm not telling you this to hurt you more, but because you deserve the whole truth. Lisa." I stared at the message, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as a desperate attempt to cause more pain, to drive a wedge between Mark and me, even after everything was settled. But another part, the accountant who tracked inconsistencies for a living, wondered. There had been 3 trips to Denver last year. Each time, Mark had returned with expensive gifts for me, guilty conscience purchases, perhaps. And he'd mentioned his assistant Megan frequently, then suddenly stopped about 8 months ago, around the time Lisa entered the picture. I saved the message but decided not to act on it immediately. There would be time to uncover that truth too, if I chose to pursue it. For now, I had enough battles to fight, enough victories to savor. I slipped into bed, my bed, and for the first time in months I slept soundly, without dreams of betrayal or revenge. The reckoning had begun, and I was just getting started. Because while Mark and Lisa might have thought they were dealing with a heartbroken wife, what they'd actually unleashed was a woman who tracked numbers for a living. A woman who understood that every action had an equal and opposite reaction. A woman who knew that, in the end, everyone pays their debts, one way or another. 6 months can change everything. Half a year after my divorce was finalized, I stood at my kitchen window, coffee in hand, watching the movers load the last of my furniture into their truck. I'd sold the house, our house, for well above asking price in the booming market. It was the final tie to cut, the last reminder of my life with Mark. I was moving forward, literally and figuratively. The civil suit had been settled 2 months ago. Mark and Lisa, facing insurmountable evidence and mounting legal fees, agreed to my terms: a substantial financial settlement, a formal written apology, and most importantly, a non-disclosure agreement preventing either of them from ever speaking publicly about me. The money didn't matter much, I was doing well on my own. My accounting practice had flourished after I refocused all my energy on work. I'd even hired 2 junior accountants to handle the overflow, specializing in helping women navigate the financial complexities of divorce. Turns out, there's an untapped market of women who appreciate an accountant who understands exactly what they're going through. As for Lisa's cryptic message about Mark's assistant Megan and the Denver trips, I did some digging, more out of professional curiosity than emotional investment. The truth emerged easily once I knew where to look. Credit card receipts for romantic dinners for 2 dia, hotel upgrades to suites, a jewelry purchase that never made its way to me. Lisa had been telling the truth about that, at least. Mark had been unfaithful long before his sister entered the picture. The revelation should have hurt, I suppose, but instead it provided clarity. Our marriage had been broken long before I realized it. Mark's affair with Lisa wasn't a momentary lapse of judgment. It was part of a pattern, a character defect. In a strange way, the knowledge was liberating. I hadn't failed as a wife, I'd simply married a man incapable of honesty or fidelity. Lisa served her time for identity theft and fraud, 14 months of an 18-month sentence. According to Janet, who still called occasionally, Lisa had completed prison-mandated therapy and vocational training. She'd moved to Arizona upon release, legally changing her last name and cutting all ties with the Morrison family. And Mark, the IRS investigation hit him hard. Between penalties, back taxes, and legal fees, he lost nearly everything. The family business filed their own charges for the embezzlement, resulting in a felony conviction, 2 years probation, and mandatory restitution. His finance career was effectively over. Last I heard, he was working as a manager at a big box store in a neighboring state, living in a 1-bedroom apartment, and driving a 10-year-old sedan, a far cry from the luxury he'd been accustomed to. Robert and Janet had been unexpected allies throughout the process. They testified in both the civil suit and the embezzlement case, choosing integrity over family loyalty. Robert's health had improved once the stress of the situation began to resolve, and they'd recently celebrated their 40th anniversary with a cruise, their first vacation in years. "We should have raised him better," Janet told me the last time we spoke. "Taught him more about consequences, about honor." "You did your best," I assured her. "Adults make their own choices." My phone buzzed with a text from Diane, checking if I was still on for our monthly dinner. We'd become close friends through this ordeal. Her fierce advocacy had turned into a genuine friendship once the legal battles ended. Tonight, she was bringing along her brother, recently divorced himself and just your type, according to Diane's not-so-subtle matchmaking attempts. 6 months ago, I would have declined immediately. But now, I found myself looking forward to dinner with a new person, to conversation unrelated to betrayal or retribution. I texted back a simple, "Yes, see you at 7, then returned to watching the movers. My new place was waiting, a sleek downtown condo with floor-to-ceiling windows and no memories. I'd furnished it entirely with pieces I loved, without compromising with anyone else's taste. The freedom was exhilarating. As the moving truck pulled away, I did one final walk-through of the empty house. In the master bedroom, I paused, remembering the shattered wine glass, the shocked expressions, the moment everything changed. The anger had faded, replaced by something like pity. Mark and Lisa had lost everything: family, reputation, financial stability, freedom, all for a relationship built on lies and betrayal. Kay, on the other hand, had found strength I never knew I possessed. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts, probably the real estate agent with final paperwork. But when I opened the door, I found Janet standing on the porch, a small box in her hands. "I hope you don't mind," she said hesitantly. "Robert and I wanted to give you something before you left." I invited her in, gesturing to the bare living room. "I'd offer you a seat, but..." She smiled. "This won't take long." She handed me the box. "It's your anniversary present, the one we bought before. Everything. We want you to have it." Inside was a beautiful crystal clock, elegantly simple. The card read, "For Rachel. May your future be filled with better times. With love, Janet and Robert." Tears pricked my eyes, the first I'd shed in months. "Thank you," I whispered. Janet hugged me briefly. "We're proud of you, you know. How you handled everything with such dignity. You deserved better than what happened." After she left, I placed the clock in my purse, the first item for my new home. It seemed fitting somehow, a timepiece to mark the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. My phone rang as I locked the front door for the last time. Unknown number. I almost declined it, then changed my mind. "Hello? Rachel?" A familiar voice. "Lisa, please don't hang up. I wanted to say something." I remained silent, waiting. "I know no apology can ever be enough," she continued, her voice tight with emotion. "But I am sorry. Genuinely. What I did to you was unforgivable. The therapy in prison. It helped me see how broken I was, how I used the adoption revelation as an excuse to hurt others. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you were right to do what you did." "All of it. Thank you for saying that," I replied, surprised by how little anger I felt. "I hope you find peace, Lisa." "You too, Rachel." I ended the call and slipped the phone back into my pocket. Closure comes in unexpected ways sometimes. As I walked to my car, keys in hand, I felt lighter than I had in over a year. The revenge, the justice, the reckoning, it had all been necessary. But now it was time to focus on rebuilding rather than retribution. I took one last look at the house before driving away. It had been a beautiful home once, filled with hopes and dreams and what I thought was love. Now it would belong to someone else, hold someone else's stories, and me. I was driving towards something new, something entirely mine. They say living well is the best revenge, but I discovered something better, living authentically, without compromise or betrayal, answering to no one but myself. That wasn't revenge, it was freedom. And in the end, that was worth more than any reckoning could provide.